So, greetings. I'm Professor Seth Frey, and we're going to learn how to read the docs, how to read the manual of an API. So, your experience to this point has been that I write a bunch of code for you and you run it. And you learn what an API is capable of, the Twitter API, in this case, the Twilio API, based on the examples I give you. I'm only giving you like a very small sample of what each of these APIs can do, of what each of these, code versions of social media interaction are capable of. So I'm only giving you a subset. And I'm not showing you all the functionality of every single feature. And I'm not equipping you to do all the stuff you might want to do. Eventually, as you get better, you end up wanting to, going almost idea first. I know this is possible. I saw someone do it. I don't know how to do it. And that ends up being when you want to read the documentation. So APIs, especially ones that are kind of professional, that you have to pay for, they can be very well documented. Sometimes more amateur APIs, the instructions aren't very good. So what we're going to do is we're just going to dig up the instructions for the Twilio API to add a little bit more functionality and see what we can really do. The reason for that is we came up with a kind of a goofy phone call here. And you can, and maybe it gave you ideas for things you could do. All these different languages you can play around with. We were looping. We had different voices. We even dialed digits. We dialed digits and we played songs. We played audio files. This is just a sample of what's possible. Let's say you want to learn more of what's possible. You want to play with other accents or languages, for example. Let's figure out what's possible. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to Google Twilio documentation. Okay, great. And I get my first hit. So Twilio docs, Twitter documentation, Instagram documentation. These are all things that will give you the manual for that API. Now, once you're there, they all look different. They're all structured different. So you don't necessarily know what you're doing right now. We can make some informed guesses. We've been doing voice instead of SMS. Within that, here's some code. I don't know what Flask is. Over here, oh my God, those are horrible words. Android, Ruby, Node, Java. I don't know what any of that is. I don't want to think about it. It's easy to get overwhelmed by docs. I kind of know what we're looking for, so I can make it look easier than it is. Or I can just click on the biggest button and kind of go on their ride. Clicking on the biggest button, I actually do see, I want to make outbound calls. So if I click that, I'll get instructions. And I'm kind of skimming. I'm not really reading. I'm just sort of skimming blindly until I see something kind of vaguely familiar or interesting. This sounds ridiculous, but this is what reading the docs is, especially when you're kind of goal-oriented, when you have a mission, when you're on a mission already, you kind of know what you want, you're just looking for the right triggers. So, but this is maybe this is better for people who already know what they're doing. Let's take a different route. Here's a really good way to approach the docs from your from where you're at. Honestly, the skimming's not so bad either. There's just lots of ways to do it, which is a good thing for you. So skimming, one thing that is triggering, I'm just scrolling through it. One thing that kind of pops up in my mind was up here, when we were sending these instructions up, the URL mentioned something called twiml, which is a horrible set of letters that kind of sticks with me. And we ended up here with twiml. So I saw twiml here. When I clicked this, it popped up. This is what I was doing as I was playing around. maybe I'll look, there it is, a URL that hosts a set of TWI-ML instructions. So you just click around blindly for a while, and this is getting to know your way around an API. It eventually becomes useful, and we start to see something familiar. We pasted something like this already into the TWI-ML bin, into that like website that let us take a URL and get our script out. So we found, with a bunch of more or less random clicking, like the beginning of the instructions. And as we just scroll, we start to see more of what's possible. Say reads text. So this is your text-to-speech part. Play plays an audio file. We use that in the script below. Apparently, within Twilio, you can also make calls within a call, record things. Imagine, I actually did this once. I built something that I fall asleep really nicely, but I don't have any relationship with my dreams. So I wrote a program that calls me 3 times in the middle of the night at random times, and as soon as you answer, it records everything. So the idea was I would record my dreams as they were happening. It ended up not really working. I couldn't pick the phone up fast enough. But like these are like the possibilities. Let's click on Say. I want to know what the options are. So within Say, let's look at kind of what we already have. We've got beep. We've got a voice being specified and a variable called loop. We've got voice being specified and a variable called language, or attribute is what you should call this. Attribute voice, attribute language, attribute loop. These are sort of the basic elements, and this is what the documentation walks you through. What are the possible arguments to voice? They're man, woman, and Alice. There's 3 values of voice, and those are different voices. What are the values of loop? It's any number greater than 0 or equal to 0. What are the possible values of language? That's interesting. Let's just click it. The possible values of language, it looks like it depends who you're using. Alice has access to this particular female voice has access to the most languages. So, table above. Okay, yeah, so you can get a Danish, a German, and several English accents, including an Indian English accent, American, UK, Canadian, or Australian, various Spanish accents, Spain, Catalan, or Mexico, and a bunch of French accents, and so on. So if I want Swedish, all I have to do is copy this, go into my original code, and replace, let's say, the Dutch or the American English with Swedish, and I'll get a different accent reading my script. If you want to translate this into here, instead of switching out the English, I'll switch out the Dutch. If you want the Swedish version of A Man, a Plan, a Canal, Panama, you can go to translate.google, translate.google.com, like we did back in the day. And I want to translate to Swedish. And there, my morning, it's actually pretty similar. My morning language lesson has a new language now. I'm going to replace the Dutch with the Swedish. And there we are. So I've added variety. Now I might have to change that to Alice in order to get the Swedish. That was what the instructions said, remember? It said these are languages available when voice is equal to Alice. If voice is equal to one of these other values, then fewer languages are available. For voice set to man or woman, you select, you have English, American English, British English, Spanish, French, Italian, or German. So not as many options. Okay, we just found more of the rules, more of the documentation, more of the options for the Twilio documentation by kind of going in through the front door. I Googled the rules and I sort of used the rules and navigated through them to the part I want. But you saw I sort of cheated. I kind of knew what I was doing. You might have noticed I had already clicked some of those links before. So we can do this another way. So let's look at the code that defines this, that we already have an example of, but we want to push that further. What we find here is we're calling a function called say. There's a function called say, there's a function called play, and these seem to be really essential to the message we built. If you want variations on that, what I'm going to recommend doing is go to google.com. And we're going to Google, let's see, Twilio docs say play. Or I'm just going to put in the names of the functions. And I think that's going to skip us straight to where we wanted to end up. There's a bunch of them. So let's see. That first one, second, third, and fourth. Does the first one do what we wanted? It's not like really super resonating. I'm not seeing versions of code I've already encountered. Maybe it's the right page, but it's not doing it for me. So I'm going to go to the next link that I got. This looks familiar. Play, loop, URL. That I've kind of seen before, but again, the code's structured a little differently. I'm not totally positive what to do with this. The answer being that this is for a language besides Python. So this kind of looks similar, but it's using nested dictionaries, where we didn't use nested dictionaries when we did that. We used we're doing a function call. So this second tab's not doing it for me. So don't spend too long trying to make it work. Just skim a bunch of pages until you find one that does what you want it to do. Here, with the third and the fourth tab, the third and the fourth hit, we get back to the pages that the third and the fourth hit. We get back to the pages we found going through the front door. So we didn't have to go too far down Google to get back on track. This is the documentation for say. And then we're back at learning voice and the different voices and different accents in the different voices and the different attributes and all that. So that's good. And the same for play. So with play, we can add a loop and we can do digits. Digits is the argument we used to play songs in DTMF tones, in phone dial tones. And you see here, acceptable values of digits are integers and W, which is the half-second wait. W actually gets defined in here. The digits attribute lets you play DTMF tones during a call. What could you use this for besides playing the Death March, the Imperial Death March? Let's say you always have to call your bank or your credit card, and it's annoying because they have the worst phone navigation menu anyway, and they just make you talk to a robot. You could write a robot that talks to the robot. It hits the right numbers, it waits the right amount of time to get through the annoying messages, to navigate to the right part, and then when the robot tells you to say something, you use your British accent or whatever to say that you want to talk to customer service, and on and on and on. So you could be a bot that fights against other bots. This is an option with these capabilities. By playing around with it, by skimming the documentation, by playing these demos, you get more and more of a sense what's possible within each API. Honestly, there's a lot of ways to learn an API. The docs are just one. They're one of the tools in your toolkit. But becoming comfortable, despite all that, I don't know what any of that means. I don't know what any of that means. I don't know what any of that means. I kind of know what some of that means. A lot of code is faking it till you make it. A lot of code is being comfortable, only understanding the 10% you need to know and kind of just turning off the rest. And by walking you through using documentation, I'm giving you more practice at that. And I'm also trying to equip you a little bit with the skills and the vocabulary and just the sort of basic literacies involved in going beyond the basics that I provided. When I was building all these demos, I used the docs, but I used lots of other... I used code samples I found randomly on the internet that I got working. I used within Python, you can kind of look inside objects and see what they're capable of. I used kind of everything I could think of. But the more ways you have it looking at a problem, the more powerful you become. So for all these reasons, it's useful to know documentation. Hopefully, you'll find yourself playing around, playing with other accents or playing with other things you could say and calling yourself with different funny messages. If you can get a friend to give you their phone number and register it through Twilio, you can send them stuff as well. You kind of need their permission. But overall, documentation is it's the rules, it's the manual, and being able to have access to it makes you more powerful and is a part of becoming a powerful person through code. Well, I hope you found that useful. Thanks a lot and good luck.